Okay, now that I'm in the room here, I can look and I can see, okay.
I don't know everyone, so I'll give it a shot.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. I was actually just looking in the list of people in the Jabber room, and I was going to start at the top and call on somebody. Thank you. Thank you, Suzanne.
It's just way sad to see you listening to them, okay?
All right. It is just 10 o'clock, so let us get ready here. This is the Registration Protocols Extensions Working Group, and I am James Galvin. Most people here, I'm sure, know me. Anton Verschuren is with us in Meet Echo. And yes, oh, he's waving. Look at that. And he got his picture up there, too. That's awesome. You want to say hello? And we heard you. That was great.
Oh.
Nope, didn't hear that. Not hearing you. Oh, there you go.
Can you hear me
Yes,
now?
we can hear you.
Okay. Hello, everybody.
Excellent. Okay, skipping right ahead. This is the usual Note Well. I'm sure you've seen it many times. It's already Thursday this week, and many of you have been here all week, so I'm sure you've seen this many times. And just important to keep that in mind. And so we'll jump right in here to our agenda. We do have a Jabber scribe. Thank you, Suzanne. And we have a note scribe. Thank you, Ulrich. We've done the Note Well and document management. This is just our opportunity to remind people that it is important to review documents. It is important to acknowledge that you have looked at it. I realize that not every document is important to everyone, so you're not going to give it a detailed review and study. But please do take the time, especially during last call, to read the documents and take a look at them and acknowledge that you've read them and don't have any issues with them. It's very important to be able to show some consensus here on our documents, and we really appreciate that. Okay, let's go to some of our existing documents. Yay for us, we've had 3 RFCs since our last meeting. This is absolutely wonderful. So we have had a very productive year this year, moving some things along. Had kind of a slow start there for a while, but we've got our change poll is out. We got the organizational mapping and extension documents published, so that's a good thing. And we have 2 documents that are currently in IESG evaluation. We have some comments that we just have to resolve. I don't think there's anything particularly material going on in these things, but I know that both sets of document shepherds know that they have work to do, and they've acknowledged to us that they're going to move those documents forward. And we're going to, we need a new version of the fee document. I don't think the bundling needs a new, oh, it does need a new document. Yeah, the bundling need a new document too. So there'll be one more of those that will then get pushed out into the publication cycle. So those are moving along, and that's a good thing. Barry.
As I remember, the main thing in this is Barry. The main thing in the fees document is fleshing out the security considerations dealing with money. So that may be a bit of a challenge to figure out what to put in there that the security ADs will be happy with.
Okay. And Roger was taking notes, right?
There's 7 changes.
There's 7 changes.
Seven comments.
Yes. Roger is saying that there's 7 comments to be addressed and 7 things that he has to take care of, but all doable. Okay, quick milestone review. We had kind of proposed these milestones, didn't really get a whole lot of discussion about them, but you know, here they are, just putting them up here again. Login security at the top is actually in working group last call, which will close the week after the IETF. It'll close next Friday, not tomorrow. The data escrow and the DNRD objects mapping is on the agenda for today. So we'll get to discuss them later. We're also going to see the partial, the RDAP, the next 3 RDAP documents. We don't have an agenda item today for the OpenID stuff. There's nothing to progress at the moment there, but it's also a further out target for us. So we're just waiting for some activity there. Okay. So now let's move into our existing work, and we'll jump right into a few presentations here. I put login security up here, not because anybody was going to talk about it, but just as an opportunity to remind us that it is in working group last call. That will close next week. We normally do a 2-week working group last call. We made this one 3 weeks because we only opened it last week, and we didn't, to allow an extra week because this is the IETF week. So we're kind of just ignoring the fact that that week is there. But again, not expecting a whole lot of discussion, not expecting any issues, but please, as a reminder, please do read the document. Please indicate that you've read it and that you have no objection. Even if you don't explicitly support it or have a need for it, it is useful to know that people are looking at the documents and moving them along. That's really very important. Really could use some help in getting more people to acknowledge that they're paying attention to the work. So the data escrow drafts will actually be up first, and Gustavo is going to do this, but Frederick, you're going to, Francisco, not Frederick. So let me get your slides up. Okay. No, doesn't seem to be working. Is it on?
Now it's on.
Oh, there you go.
Yes. Okay. Hello, this is Francisco. I'm presenting on behalf of Gustavo, who could not be here. This is about the data escrow drafts. They have been around for quite a while. So quickly, what is data escrow? Is a process by which some parties, usually the registries, registrars in the domain name space, store critical data necessary to restore service in case of catastrophic failure. And they usually do this with a third party, normally called data escrow agent. And there is usually some contractual conditions that if they are met, for example, an emergency failure, then the data could be released to third party beneficiary, for example, in the case of utilities, ICANN, so that ICANN could give it to someone else to run the registry or the registrar. Next slide, please. Oh, okay, thanks. So this has been around for quite a while, the concept of data escrow in the utility space since 1999, the first contracts with ComNet and org. And as part of the new utility program, there was a thought of having a new, more modern data escrow format to be used. That was defined and has been in use since the launch of the new utilities. Next slide. There was, in the side of the IETF, there was above back in 2010, I won't say, whenever IETF 77 was. And unfortunately, the working group was not formed, but a mailing list was started, and work on the draft was carried through in that mailing list and other forums. The specifications have been stable now for a couple of years or more, and only minimal updates have been done, basically maintenance or minimal issues that have been detected. Next slide. The drafts, I think this is just a quick history. It was originally one draft. It was split into two. Then there was the proposal by Jim Gould here and others to extend the format to not only be XML, because the original proposal was only XML. So the proposal, so Jim and others proposed to make it be basically a dual format. So it's XML alone or XML plus CSV to escrow the objects. Next slide. The primary target is domain names. However, it can be extended to other registries or other type of registries. The format also supports the different types of deposits. It can be the full deposit, meaning the whole set of data, or it can be something incremental or differential, just adding or deleting objects as they have been changed or removed or added. Next slide. So the first draft, the Regext data escrow, that's sort of the container definition of the container for data escrow, and defines, for example, the type of deposit you are making, a full, incremental, or differential, the ID, etc., and a couple other things. Next slide. Defines also, importantly, the watermark, what is called the watermark, that is the date and time corresponding to when the deposit or when the data from the registry or the database is being pulled. So, for example, if the data escrow deposit is corresponding to today, we'll have the timestamp of today. The format is also extensible, so you can define, you can identify the extensions that are being used, the objects that are being escrowed there. Next slide. The objects mapping is where you define where the definition for all the objects that can be escrow is defined. As I said before, it's supposed to format XML or CSV. Next slide. This is the list of objects that are defined in the document. This list has not changed for years now. You will find what the typical type of objects you find in a registry, domain name registry or registrar. Next slide. Who uses the data escrow format? As I said, most of the GTLDs are using this. Excuse me. Since the launch of the new GTLD round in 2013, this has been in use, and nowadays even some legacy GTLDs have moved to this new format. Excuse me. So it's being used for the data escrow obligations that are contained in the contract, but also we understand has been used by registries when they are transitioning. So if, for example, a registry is changing from a registry service provider, they typically use this data escrow format to transit the data from one RSP to another. It is also being used by the corresponding data escrow agents. I believe we have 9 in the GTLD space, and all of them currently support that format. They have to do some validations per contract they have with ICANN. And I have to confess, we didn't check if this is being used in other contexts, for example, CCTLD space. It is also being used also in the GTLD space by the emergency backend registry operators. This is a service we have in ICANN contract. We have 3 providers that are really available to take over TLD if there were some emergency. And we unfortunately had to use this a year or 2 ago with one GTLD that had a failure with one of the critical functions that are described in the contract, so that TLD was successfully taken by one of the Ibero providers, and we used the data escrow format to rebuild the TLD. It has another use also in the ICANN contract. The GTLDs have to provide access in bulk to registration data to ICANN on a periodic basis, and we use that format, the data escrow format, for the registries to provide that to us. Next slide. So we think these drafts are quite mature. They have been around for several years, and we know this has been just adopted by the working group recently. However, like I said, we think they are ready. They have been used. They are being used by several parties. So we are asking whether you guys agree that it would be wise to now go directly to working group last call, and there are the 2 drafts. That's it. Thank you.
Any questions or comments about these drafts from anyone? I see Antoine getting in the queue, but go ahead down here first. Ulrich, please.
Hi, this is Ulrich from the Swedish Internet Foundation. I would like to ask, you said that the escrow format is extensible. So are the objects extensible too?
I believe so.
Because we have seen VX, for example, use extensions to the contact objects. That would be really interesting.
Yes.
Okay, let me go online to Antoine.
Okay, now let me go online too. The sound sometimes is a bit shaky, but okay. I only have one question actually, and it is: can you explain to me what the intended status of the documents, why it is standards track?
I'm sorry, I could not.
I think his question is, why is the document standards track? Why is the intended status standards track?
Instead of informational or best current practice, for example.
Sorry, what was the last thing?
Instead of informational or best current practice.
I don't think we have a strong opinion, but Jim, since you're a co-author, I don't know if you want to say something about it.
Yeah, it's Jim Gould from VeriSign. Yeah, we've actually gone through that cycle and the length that these drafts have been in existence. But in essence, since it defines a standard file format that's used for escrows, it's not an operational practice. It's actually a file format, and it's used by many, many different parties in the registry industry. So I'm not sure it would be a good fit for informational. I really see it as a standards track based on its usage and the fact that it's defining a standard file format.
And I guess for me, what I would add to that is just that it is in essence, it's a communication mechanism. It's a protocol for communication between parties. So file format is, what it is because you're transferring a whole file, but it is really a communication method and the syntax and semantics for all of that. So I think standard track is the right thing for it. So let me just go back to Antoine. Did you have a preference that it not be standards track?
Well, I was asking the question because I don't know if this is if this is a completely new protocol or that it is defining something else. And it is defining a file format, and that's what I understood. But it's also defining a file format between a limited number of parties. So hence my question.
Okay, thanks.
And for the rest, we'll probably have a discussion on the list.
Thanks. Back to the queue,
Yes,
Jim.
Jim Gould, VeriSign again. Actually, I was thinking that it might be a good idea for us to add an implementation status section, considering the fact that we have so many implementation lists that we go ahead and update the drafts to include that.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Thanks for that. Rick?
Rick Wilhelm, VeriSign. Two questions. One, since there's going to be PII transited in the escrow in a lot of cases, is there some sort of privacy considerations that we need to put in on that?
Good question.
Because that as you know from the data that gets collected, in certain cases it's going to have contact data, and so obviously it needs to technically get escrow in order for the escrow to fulfill its function, but it is going to be having that data in there. So that's just something that is probably worth considering. Okay. And then secondly and lastly, is that it's good that we're standardizing formatting and certainly supportive of that. But given what's going on in the land of GTLDs, the expedited policy development process related to registration data, the data that is collected by registrars and registries is likely to be morphing and changing over the next period of time, relatively soon. And so it's unclear to me at present what sort of flexibility is already built into the standard to accommodate this, or are we going to need to rev this document in order to accommodate some possible future changes to the escrow format that might be driven by the changing registration data requirements?
Right. So the data escrow specification was defined with having in mind to support multiple set of contractual or policy requirements. So the way it was defined makes almost everything optional, and it's up to some other means, contract, policy, whatever, to make the list of things that need to be included. So in that sense, I think we're safe, but it would be great to hear what you think or others think about that.
Okay. Maybe we can look at that and make sure that language is explicit enough that clearly defines that this is that kind of mechanism and doesn't really prescribe what is required. Something like that. Thank you.
I think this has been not only deployed but used stable. Therefore, I would urge us that we should push this over RFC. So we have an RFC and proposed standard. I think it's the right thing.
Thanks, Mark. I'm not seeing anyone else in the queue there. I will add for myself, speaking for myself, and we are an implementer of this as other folks are in the room here and been doing this for a long time. It is interesting, the question that about the future of this document in format, given what is going on in ICANN and what it's going to do. I don't know how to respond to that right now, but we should take the discussion to the mailing list. Part of what's going on here in my mind is these things have been broadly used, broadly deployed for, almost a decade now. I think the documents are pretty well baked, and it is important and useful to get that document publication closed, that cycle. Let's have a discussion on the list as to how far we want to take revisions to this document. And it may be that we should iterate on the document and iterate on a published document instead of iterating on this specification at this point in time is a better thing, just because of the broad deployment while we wait for other things to happen. So that would be my personal comment to all of it. I'm generally supportive of moving these things forward. Jim?
Yes, Jim Gould from VeriSign. In thinking about the future of the document and the potential for changes, we may want to consider relaxing some of the requirements in there, because if it becomes an RFC and in essence something which is required becomes optional based on later changes in policy, we wouldn't want to have to put a new RFC out there. So something to think about.
Yeah. So thank you, Francisco. Just a quick comment then as chair about this document. Again, it's on our milestone list. The intent was that there probably wouldn't be too much discussion of this document, although it was important to bring it back to the surface, put it up in front of people, yes, take the time to give it a review and make sure, that there are no issues with it, but ideally to progress this along pretty quickly. But we will take the question to the mailing list about whether or not to drop this into working group last call and move this along. Let's see if any showstopper objections come up on the mailing list and get everyone involved. Okay. Next up on our agenda is the RDAP documents. So Mario, do you have a preference in what order, Mario, or can I just bring them up in this order, or you have all three of these, right? You have a preference on the order of these three? Okay, I'll just bring them up in whatever order they're here. Okay, so here we go. Partial response first.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mario Alfredo from .it registry.
This will work for you.
Yeah, okay.
You can do that.
These are very short presentation about the progress of each of the three drafts. Is only for summarize the most meaningful changes since the last meeting and to collect possible feedbacks from the attendees. The first one draft is partial response. The version 01, the version 01, the basic field sets has been changed from required to optional, so their implementation now is considered helpful but not required to improve RDAP interoperability. The definition of fields included in the field set has been removed because there was a clear feedback from the working group to avoid a clear definition of the fields included in the brief field sets and to let the other providers to implement the brief field set as they see fit. So now another provider is free to define the content of the brief field set. In the version 02, the negative answer section has been added. So now it is clear that the request including an unsupported field set should contain a bad request response code, and the IANA consideration section has been added to ask IANA for the registration of such setting extension. So yesterday, Tom Harrison, who I can see here, provided some feedbacks about each of the 3 drafts. I provided my comments in turn. This feedback is not included in this presentation due to the lack of time, but I hope that everyone, every working group member could give his own contribution to the discussion of these new feedbacks. Apart the feedbacks provided by Tom Harrison, I think that there are no other issues. So the author consider this document pretty ready for the working group last call. I can pass to the other, the second draft.
How do folks want to do this? Do we want to take them as a block, and maybe we'll just quickly go through the couple of slides for each one, and then we'll take as a block to talk about them? Seeing a couple of nodding heads on that, so let's do it that way.
I prefer to talk about reverse search as the last starting from paging. Okay. The changes shown in the slide are about the sorting and pages draft. In the version 01, the paging metadata object has been simplified, and now it contains only three members: total count, page count, and links. In the version 02, the duality between offset and cursor pagination has been fixed. Now the cursor parameter can encrypt both offset and cursor pagination information. These are shown in the slide are simply encryption based on a base 64 encoding, but obviously they are not considered real. So the both offset and limit parameters have been removed, and also in this version, the IANA consideration section has been added to ask IANA for the registration on sorting and paging extension. In version 03, the CC sorting property has been added to the list of the sorting property due to the publication of RFC 8605. There are, in addition to the issues provided by Tom Harrison, some issues the author consider minor. For example, should the value of J-card sort as parameter be considered when sorting? We think that the answer is no, because this parameter is related only to the N and the org VCard elements, and it makes sense only in a collection of J-cards. This is not the case because we are in the case of a collection of objects including J-card. Could a possible J-card replacement affect the sorting capability? This is a possibility that will not affect the draft, because the ADAP implementer would simply need to change the JSON path member in sorting metadata. So it can change the representation of the contact information and simply changing the JSON path member in sorting metadata to maintain the correspondence between the sorting properties and the J-card element. Okay. The last one is the reverse search draft. As a consequence to the discussion inside the working group, within the working group about the privacy consideration, I have changed the privacy consideration section to make clear that this capability must be provided only under strict control and only to users who are legitimated by a legal basis. In the privacy consideration section, some of these potential users are exposed, are reported. I think that probably there are other potential users that can take advantage from this capability and are legitimated by some legal basis. These are just to refresh the current path available for this capability. And I think that there are two open issues to tackle. One, if, for example, should we add a path segment to enable reverse search on a custom property, just to make this capability more extensible. For example, at .it we have a property about a registrant that is the personal, the tax identification number, and this is a custom property. It is used only in the context of the .it registry. So my opinion is that this is an example of a custom property, and we should provide a way to extend the possible property subject to reverse search. A consequence to the introduction of this new search segment path segment is if we should opt for a unique path allowing the reverse search on an entity detail, on any entity detail. So, For example, the previous entity handle or entity FN search path segment could be translated into new search with the same, sharing the same reverse search path segment. Another problem is if we should avoid the value member to have different types. This is the case when we pass from the representation of an address and the representation of any other value connected to the other reverse search properties. So the solution coming to my mind are splitting the value member in S value and O value to represent a string value and an object value, just to not to have to oblige the other implementer to customize the JSON deserialization methods. Another possibility is define the value member type always as a string and leave and join and predicates to a future capability. So, for example, the last example of a query, a reverse search query, could be transformed into reverse search query joined in end by a future add-up capability addressing the complex, the submission of complex queries with predicates joined by end or so on and so on.
Okay. That's it. Right?
Okay.
Okay. Just to put these documents in context, so the mic is open now for any questions or comments, concerns with these things, and as we get ready for that, all three of these documents are new features and enhancements to RDAP, stuff that wasn't there before. So it's important to take a look at them and consider if this is really the best way to do them. From the point of view of this working group, we had targeted having all three of these things done and published, pushed out the door by the next IETF in November. So it's important to keep that in mind. We need to have whatever discussion we need to have about moving these forward. And I'll observe that currently it looks like the first two, the sorting and searching and partial response, do seem to be relatively stable. The reverse search document seems to have just some open questions and issues here. So if there is no further discussion that happens on the partial response and sorting and searching, they're likely to go to last call sometime relatively soon. We'll push through the data escrow things first, and then we'll be coming around to these documents and look to move them along. So, please do take the opportunity, if you haven't been thus far, to give these documents a read and a review and give due consideration to whether they're ready to move forward or not. And with that, the mic lines are open. So, please.
Great, thanks. Rick Wilhelm, Verisign. Thanks, Mario, for doing these and some good updates in this recent round. My thoughts and concerns around these are more macro, not related to the particulars of either searching, sorting, partial response, or reverse search, but more that from an industry standpoint are standing largely in stark contrast to the thing that Francisco just presented, which has been in production for eons. The target production date for ICANN contracted GTLDs for RDAP is August 26th, as many folks in this room know. And so RDAP is heading towards production, and no one has really any operational experience at scale is very limited across the industry. And I would offer that the industry in itself is going to be going through a rapid learning curve just on basic RDAP operations, both from the server side and from people building clients against that. And so while these features that we're talking about are generally interesting and certainly applicable, and I think are going to happen, my big concern about the entirety of them is that implementations are going to be evolving very, very rapidly, and we may be inadvertently memorializing into an RFC something that, with some implementation experience, is going to be subject to revision based on things, right? And then I think the thing on reverse search is a slightly different one, because there, even the policy on that in the GTLD space is yet to even be really started on the reverse search. And so I think that standardizing in that one in particular would be very premature. And the other two, I think we're probably safe from a policy standpoint, but the technology and our community learnings on this are going to be moving rapidly. And in 24 months, we'll be standing in, we'll be having a Regext meeting wherever it is in 2021. And we'll all say, wow, I can't believe it's been 2 years. Look how this has grown. So generally supportive of the concept. I just think it's a little early to be cooking and serving this dish when it's so. Anyway,
I'm aware that I think that there is a distinction between the three documents. The reverse search and partial response address a problem that is common to every REST service providing data. So I'm quite confident that the solution will not be encounter any issues in the future, any particular issues in the future if we now release this document as a RFC in the short term. I have a different opinion about reverse search. I know that this is it is specific. It is a specific solution for a specific problem of in the domain context. So I have no rush. I can't wait for possible feedback. Possible feedbacks coming from the working group members. I thank Tom for his contribution to moving forward these documents. But I hope that there will be other feedbacks coming from the working group members. So the first two documents seem to me more stable than reverse search. So this is why I'm thinking to ask for to postpone the milestone of the reverse search to have a more comprehensive document. I have no problem in this sense.
So let me ask a clarifying question, if I may, Rick, just to make sure that I heard you correctly. So I think you made an excellent case for actually pushing out the current milestones for these documents to give ourselves a chance to get some real implementation experience with them. Because you are asking a very valid question about, has anyone implemented these that you've interoperated with, all three of these? You've done the implementations. Has anyone else?
Maybe Tom has made another implementation of the three drafts. There are implementation about paging from Google, and no other implementation.
Okay.
I can.
So that's an important question. Did I hear you correctly, Rick? I mean, I guess basically that's what you were
Yeah, I mean,
pointing out.
That's fair. That I don't think there's a particular. I think that these would benefit from some implementation experience across the board in the community, and as well as the other thing that the community I think is going to be soon, and we're seeing that soon encountering is implementation experience and possible changes required for vanilla RDAP. Right, we're seeing some of that discussion later coming up in the JS contact.
Right.
That's an example of one instance.
I led the working group to decide the priority of these documents. I have no problem to. My wish is to have at the end the most comprehensive document. So.
Okay, so let's continue moving down to. So thanks, Rick, and we'll make sure to take that. Certainly, the chairs take notice that delaying the milestone might be appropriate here, and we'll bring that to the mailing list too and get some other input. Go ahead.
Tom Harrison, APNIC. I think your point here about the value member not having different types is a good one. I think it should be a string in all cases, like you said. It just will make things easier for implementers. More generally on the responses that you had on the list, I think one of the issues that affects both reverse search and sorting and paging is this CC and country name issue. You might have one server that publishes country, one server that publishes CC, one that does both, different parameters, etc. I half wonder whether just getting rid of country from sorting and just limiting it to CC in both cases and saying servers can map if they need to from what they have.
I provided a response to your questions by email. My opinion is that the situation is different for sorting and paging and for reverse search. In sorting and paging, the RDAP implementer decide to provide CC as a sorting property because CC is the element that the RDAP server returns. So in the case of reverse search, you are searching for something connected to the country. So if you for example, if you declare CC equal Italy, my RDAP server can transform this information as something to match in the country information I have. So if I have country name, I will search for Italy. If I have the country code, I will search for .it because it is a search. So I don't want to, as I told you by email, I don't want to define an explicit mapping. I want to define a semantic equivalence between the concept of between the country code that is reported in the query and the information I have on the underlying DBMS. So I think that the RDAP implementer should be free to map this information on his information. If the country name is available instead of country code, they will map the country, the information, so the country code IT to the country name Italy. Okay, just to not lose relevant information and to provide as many results as possible. which are relevant. Okay, this is my opinion. We can, due to the fact that there are that the information is represented in different ways, and there is, in my opinion, it is much more difficult to define an explicit mapping. It's better to say when you are searching for cc.it, you can search for cc.it, country name equal Italy. You can search Italy instead in an unstructured address, for example. So you can provide all the relevant. Your server can return all the relevant information to the users. A different perspective is for the sorting capability, because you expect that the cc.it will appear in your response because you are sorting for that information. So in that case, the cc, for example, the cc parameter must appear, but you as an ADAP implementer decide if cc is a sorting properties, or country name is a sorting properties, or something else is a sorting property.
Okay, so thank you. Mario, one thing I want to be careful of, I'm a little conscious of time here. We don't need to solve everything here, but since that was a question that was on the mailing list, we can just defer to taking the discussion there too. Try and have shorter responses, but please go ahead.
Stefan Bartsmeyer, AFNIC. Regarding the reverse search draft, I don't think that we should be, as a working group, tied to ICANN policies, because LDAP is also used by CCTLD, by address registries. So it's not a problem for me if we move forward, but there is, of course, a big problem with privacy issues because of the power of reverse search. You can find a lot of things that you didn't know. The fact that you can get information about the domain coca-cola.com does not mean you have a right to know all the domains registered by the Coca-Cola company. And it's even worse for individual users, of course. So this has been discussed already in Prague last time, but I don't see any progress on that. The current privacy considerations could be exactly the same for the ordinary LDAP. There is nothing new in it, just saying that it should be done in a lawful way, which is quite obvious. I mean, all of us here, we do only lawful things. So really, this draft must not be published before there is some clear warning in the privacy consideration that reverse search is much more powerful than ordinary search and deserve special protections.
But you know that my opinion is not it's not the same as your, because I think that ADAP as the measures to implement, to enforce the security, to allow this capability only to legitimated users. There are examples available on the web of bulk reverse with capability available for money. So we are talking about something that has been overcome by the technology in the reality. There are some services available on the internet that you can do the reverse with, and probably in the future you will have the possibility to reverse a DAP for money. and these services are open to everyone. So I think that it's better to have a capability to provide reverse search only to authenticated users than to provide add-up reverse search to everyone in the future.
So the bad guys are doing it and selling it, so the good guys should have no problem doing it also. This is a line of reasoning that I cannot share.
I think, Safin brings up a very good question, though, and a good point, which really we do need more discussion on the mailing list. There is a distinction between, privacy policies and the effect on what the protocol does. So having a protocol which defines the right way to do things, and then in the privacy considerations, we just need to call out that, there are policies that are going to affect us. But we should have more discussion about this on the list. And what we need to put in these privacy consideration sections for these drafts.
I agree with you that it's partly an issue of policies, so not our job. But what we should do is to clearly warn that reverse search creates very different problems from ordinary access and requires special policies.
Speaking personally, I tend to agree with you. But what I think is important and why I'm stressing more discussion on the mailing list is we do need other voices in this. Other people need to speak about what the right way is to characterize this. So, and then we should have that discussion. Let's move on.
Andy Newton. So Stefan probably stole most of my thunder here. I agree we need a better privacy story around this. Practically speaking, I don't think this is going to get through IETF last call without it. So, I also do want to echo the fact that ICANN should not be the gating factor for this. First off, the ICANN is not one mind about anything. The TSG actually pointed out the reverse search draft as something that is needed. So that's part of ICANN, or that was an ICANN group. Just because the policy people in their expedited status aren't really doing anything. We can't sit around and wait on them. Also, RDAP is used by CCTLDs, it's used by the RIRs, so it's not just a GTLD thing. So we can't use that as a gating factor. But I do think we need a better privacy story. I also do owe it to Mario to review all the drafts. I sent comments early on, but I need to do that again.
Okay.
Just a clarifying question then. So Rick was kind of making the case earlier to, delay publication, but I hear you pointing out that Rick's argument was based in part on deployment at scale and what's going on in the GTLD space, but you're sort of arguing the other side of that's not the only customer here. So maybe we shouldn't gate based on that. Is that correct?
Yes, there are many people who have deployed this at scale already, so there's plenty of experience out there. And if we want to wait on ICANN policy, we could be here for 10 years waiting on that to happen. So we should not do that.
Okay. Yeah.
Jabber Scribe for Peter Cook, who says agrees with Stefan. This working group has not addressed the risk of policy laundering or the impression thereof.
Thanks. I'm not quite as crisp as Peter, as Rick Wilhelm. And so to be clear, it's not just ICANN policy that I was talking about. It's the ICANN policy there is incorporating particular privacy restrictions that have been put in place by the GDPR. So that's the issue of ICANN policy. So just to be clear, it's not that this group should be beholden on ICANN, but that the GDPR is rippling into ICANN policy, which is causing a bunch of change. It's going to cause a lot of change for a large number of implementers of this. And so that's the key point there is that it's the GDPR trigger on ICANN policy. Because I agree that ICANN policy can and frequently is all over the map. This is a particular situation where we know that your ECEU law, GDPR, is coming in on that. So thank you.
So if I may, I'm going to try and frame that back and actually make it even more general. We did say just a little bit ago, and it is true, Stefan's got us on this discussion. We really do need to have a better privacy discussion about what goes in these drafts and for the privacy considerations. And we need to address that much more carefully. It's, GDPR, ICANN might be principal motivating factors, but it really does need to be a general discussion about privacy and its effect on this registration data in general, in all of the contexts in which it's used. So that's definitely a discussion to take to the mailing list on these documents.
Yes, Jim Gould from VeriSign. One additional item, since we're talking about implementations, can we beef up the implementation status sections of these drafts to cover that?
Yes, that actually is something that we should do. I meant to mention that earlier. Thanks for that, Jim. When I was asking you before about whether there were implementations other than your own, we should add that section into the drafts so that it's there and get that on record as we're going forward.
Okay.
So, okay. Any other questions or comments? We're a little bit ahead of schedule, so we have time. Go ahead, Liz.
Scott Hollenbeck, just to the point you just made there, Jim, as a co-author of one of these drafts, one of the struggles I always have when writing an implementation status section is my lack of knowledge of what other people are doing, right? So it's okay to sit here and say, hey, Mario, put this text in there, and he can document his implementation experience. But if you have implemented these drafts, please let Mario know, right? And so it makes his job easier to add that text when he knows what other people are doing.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Thank you for that. Okay. Quick recap. Just keep in mind the first two documents we're thinking are relatively stable, except now for dealing with privacy considerations and implementation status. And the Regex, we clearly have some additional discussion we're going to have here on some issues on the mailing list. But please do comment on the list.
Thank you all for your comments and feedbacks.
Okay. Next up on the agenda is an interesting topic discussion. Is this EPP RDAP two-stream model working? And George Michelson is going to come up and poke the bear. I should be fair. I should be nicer about that, but please go ahead.
Hi, George here. This is a very quick, no slide talk. It is too soon to answer this question because we only entered this phase of operation, correct me if I'm wrong, one IETF ago. I think we decided we would have this model in Prague, didn't we?
Yes. Yes. So you should say what the model is quickly.
What I am trying to do here, I am not trying to wreck the joint. What I want you to do is I want you to keep in mind this question: does the model work? Because I think we are going to want to review this probably in 2 or 3 IETFs time. So I'm putting this on the table now so that we start thinking now, is this producing a pace of work which works for us? The reason I'm doing that is because the 2-document model, it feels to me, has potential to create a risk. And an example of this would be, we have here a document of substance, the reverse search document, and we now have a massive issue of substance, the privacy issue, and it's effectively going to block. This is going to be something that I would believe you and Peter reasonably are going to say, it's not tenable to progress this work if we do not adequately address a significant privacy and policy issue. And so we're going to wind up probably, and I know I'm predicting a chair behavior, but the probable outcome is a substantive document in privacy is going to appear. And it's going to be a blocker for a reverse search draft, which means we're going to stack another document on top of the document stack we've got. And at 2-document pace, we're not going to progress these documents. So there's a process aspect of necessarily discovering we have big work to do. And all I wanted to do, and I stress, I am not trying to wreck the joint. All I wanted to do is say, start thinking now, because this is going to come back probably in 2 or 3 IETFs time. Is it working? That was it. Questions, discussion, whatever the chair lets you do. Dancing lessons. Rumba.
This is Barry, being an AD. One of the reasons that you have this is AD communication with the AD asking you to gate your work and not dump everything in. So what I'll say about that is that if unexpected things come up and you suddenly realize you need to do something new that blocks other stuff, I'm going to be flexible about allowing that to come into the stream. I'm not going to stand here and say, no, you're already full, you already have all the documents you can handle. We're going to negotiate.
Yeah, I mean, that's good
so
to know.
I just want to let you know,
Yeah.
I'm not saying your question is a very good question and everybody needs to think about it, but I'm just saying, when you think about it, be aware that while we have guidelines for progress of documents,
Yeah.
I'm going to be flexible about that.
So I think what I would want to stress is be generous. Don't assume that we're heading to a no, it's not working outcome. We should be generous and give it its chance. And
George, I think you bring up a very good point. I admire your ability to predict the future.
I got a horse on the 12:45 stakes, Kentucky.
Yes, we'll need you in about a year. So anyway, my biggest question when you brought this up was, did we actually write down what this two-stream model is? And even going further, is it in the charter?
This is let's see, the charter does have us working in both of these areas. So this is just a functional implementation of being allowed to work in both of those areas. And we worked this out with the area director in March. We just kind of proposed, hey, let's do this. And we kind of had a verbal consensus from those in the room and no objections on the mailing list.
No,
and here we
it's
are.
not documented.
And no is a fine answer. No is a fine answer.
Okay, so no.
I would ask that if we could write it down. I don't know if it has to be in the charter. I don't want to be high ceremony about this. But just someplace so people can refer to it, because when I was just like, what's the two-stream model again? Because I barely remember it from Prague. So if we could have it written down someplace that's easily accessible, I think that'd be great.
That's a good question and absolutely fair.
Oh yeah, the working group wiki. Barry says do it in the working group wiki, which is good. That's good for me.
Yep. Excellent suggestion. Thank you for that. The chairs will take that action.
Hi, this is Ulrich from the Swedish Internet Foundation. I think we deliberately choose this model because historically this group has not been the most active, to say the least. And I think we wouldn't improve the situation by splitting us in two working groups, because, I mean, because we're in two working groups doesn't mean we have 48 hours a day. So,
well, I'm going to be over that I could be the other side of that conversation, but I am trying to behave respectfully of a model we took. And all I'm saying is, let's think about it.
But I think maybe we should even document the reason why we did
Yeah.
it. Yes.
I mean, I agree with you.
I've said my piece. That's all I needed. Thanks for listening.
Okay. No, thank you, George. It is actually a valid question to ask, whether the way in which we're working is working, and that's important and it's useful. And I'm glad that he raised the question. And yes, we should write this down and document it and think about it. And after we've done this a couple of meetings, or at least for a year, so maybe next March, we should make a point of bringing this question up again and seeing if it's working for us. So we had some good motivation and reasons for creating this model, and just something to try. So we'll see. Okay. With that, let me pause for a moment to introduce this idea of new work and what it means. The reason why this is on here is, yes, we have a couple of documents that are in ISG evaluation. We have several documents which are targeted, ideally, to be pushed out for publication before the end of this year, so before the next IETF meeting. We have a set of documents that we're looking to move along, and that opens up opportunity for us to consider new work. It is true that we have quite a backlog of a dozen and a half or so documents that are potential for moving forward. This is just another set of things to put in the mix for us to think about. So we have a few people with some suggestions that we want to put on the table. These have not been adopted by the working group yet, but we're putting them out there for consideration, because at some point here, as we move between November and March IETF meetings, we're going to have to be thinking about which documents do we want to pull up to adopt and add to our milestone list to go forward. So we're going to add these to the mix, as well as all of the other ones that we have. Okay, so this is just calling them out for people. So let's move through them here. First thing we're actually going to do is, this is, we put it under new work, but Mark, you want to come up and talk about what's going on with RDAP deployment and findings. Mark's been keeping quite a good document going for us here. Let me, there you go, and I believe that will work for you, right? Yes.
Good morning, Marc. This is about a presentation about this draft, so all the details are there. The context of this draft is that while developing various tools in my team and myself related to RDAP, so client servers and conformance tools, we've found many issues in the field. Some may have been corrected, hopefully, but the reality is not that much. All the information about the guilty RDAP servers are redacted, so you're not going to be on the spot, some of you. Many applies to domain, but some applies to IP and AS registries. And that's a summary of the issues. Example of RDAP values, for example, that are not IANA registered or badly used. These are examples on the left that we see on the field and possible good values on the right. So it's sometimes I would say it's something laziness of developers not using the right strings. Or they have a reason, but they don't register the values as they should in the RFCs, as said in the RFCs. Others like, OK instead of active, or owner instead of registrant. It seems to be there's a need for a registry entity that is not yet modeled or identified. For example, in the OIS, the registry itself is identified, while in the RDAP response, it's not identified itself, and that's could be for example, providing info about the registry website, for example. Another case we found is while we are working with the IANA is to have a downstream registry. For example, if you request in the IANA RDAP server will actually answer for .com, but .com would actually in the response we should actually say this is the RDAP server of that TLD, right? That model is not. Doesn't exist actually in RDAP. Should it be a rail down or a specific entry? That's something that needs to be worked out. Yeah, RDAP extensions. Almost every RDAP server has its own extensions. They are not registered in IANA. Those two, ICANN RDAP technical implementation guide and response profile have been registered, and as you see, there's some kind of a confusion on zero or level or version and stuff. So I guess we need probably to update the spec to make it clear what's the actual usage, because it's just by seeing the values in the field, it seems that there's probably some text to add, and please people register your extensions. CORS is not set by some servers. The RFC says recommended. I think we should say must if you are deploying an RDAP in server in a public internet. All kind of things that I've seen in JSON. Responses, object last name empty. We've seen other things, links, relation, values, different things, including a URL, which is completely buggy. But those seems to be, if you look at the registry for links, relations, there's like thousands of them being defined with no real semantics being, actually clearly defined. So it appears to me that people are just, picking one and then we'll kind of losing the semantics. So we might be in a situation where we should probably, do a little bit more work in defining those semantics correctly, so people use the same value for the same semantic. Right, seeing this, as you see, the example is redacted, the actual server, but this is an example of self with related, which points to itself. So a customer, I had my client who was buggy, was looking for, going to the related and then go the same object and then was doing a loop, One mitigation may be to update the RFC to prohibit this case, and I'll give a little bit more details at the end for what we could do. For a client, if you send me a link without a rel, I have no idea what to do with this link. What is this, right? How do I show it? What's the semantic between this link? We could update the RFC that says, require value. The current RFC, especially the response, is pretty nice. There's no requirement, you can do almost anything. Well, okay, so therefore they may be compliant, but that doesn't tell me anything for the client side. So we might like to tighten a bit the RFC, or another possibility at the end I was thinking was maybe to have a BCP, that says, while the RFC says, you're free to do this, you may prefer to do this. The BCP being generic for not related necessarily to ICANN, GTLDs, but, for IP registries too, for RRs. An interesting one. Introduction is always fun. Here's an example of the self and the href. So again, redacted, but the real thing, which is a mix of Punycode A label and U label in the URL. Well, the self actually should be the kind of the unique, identifier for this object, but the queries could be a mix of U labels or A labels, right? So, what's the policy, right? So, what's the real thing? And this server was actually reporting the self differently for the same object, depending on the query. So I think, again, the specification could be a bit more tightened and saying, for the self, always return the A labels or, something like that. So it will be consistent. This is, to me, a bug. Registrant, which is within the entity of abuse. Not makes any sense to me, but yeah. URL encoding. So this is actually from the one of the RRR, because that's the only one that has colons in the URL for requests. So one of the RRR server actually accepted the first one, but rejected the second one because it was person encoded. I think I've been into the RFCs and it's probably legitimate, but not nice for the clients, because some clients' libraries just, person encode as soon as there's kind of a, strange character in it. And because the bad thing of URLs and schemas is that they depend on which scheme, the processing of the right side of the scheme can be different. So anyway, so I think that would be a right thing to do. So this one is interesting. I've seen different uses of rel equal related. And the ICANN RDAP profile actually says this is the link to essentially the registrar server to get the registrant information. However, I've seen other use of related which is related means something larger than just registrar server. Therefore, there's a kind of ambiguous semantic on related. So I'm not sure what to do. I guess the ship has the train already gone, but maybe something like a new rel that would be registrant info would be more, appropriate. But I'm not sure what to do with this one. Search patterns that are not. So this is I reported to the two authors of RFC 7482, and they agreed. So I guess the wording was not clear about patterns when they were not patterns, actually. G cards. This is the worst part. Look at the left one. I mean, so as a client, what do I do? Nothing. What do I display, right? Essentially, this V card is empty, seen in the field. The right side, I don't know. I think it's a lazy developer. I'm sorry if you are the person here. But this one is the address, right? And they just put an array while there's nothing to put in the array. So it could be just, quote, quote, right? But they put an array with empty in it. So, I need to, on my client side, to actually look, there's an array, so I'm preparing to show the array like in multiple lines because that's what it is. And then it's all empty, so I need to revert, and it's like, please. This is done. Bootstrap registries, the RFC says you should have a trailing slash. Not all were done, but actually it's been fixed, it seemed, because all now are done. So good that my draft is being read by some people. A comment I got from a few people, RFC 7484, the Bootstrap registries, says you could specify multiple RDAP servers, and that was back in the WIRD's working group discussions, and there was ideas of maybe HTTP and HTTPS, and maybe provide some level of redundancy. What people were saying is this is just too much and not needed. We should have only one, and it should be HTTPS. I don't know what to do. It's kind of a bit late now, but that's what it is. Document status. So the document contains obviously ephemeral issues, bugs and implementations that should be solved, hopefully. Values to be registered in IANA. So that's something that should disappear, obviously. But I still think, and I've seen some people fixing the bugs they have as they show those. So I think there's a value of the document as it goes. There are recommendations to specifications, discussion points on how to improve, and other topics I recently discovered and haven't got time to document publish. So two things we could do with this document, just let it go, continue. Should the working group decide to update the specs, then there's some recommendations there if we agree to be folded in. Happy to start working on this, or if the others want to do, whatever. My idea is that it could become a BCP by having, best current practice on things that you should do and not do. And remove all the ephemeral issues that are gone. So that's my presentation.
Let me first start just by thanking you, Mark, for doing this. I'm sure you've heard that many times from others who were on the receiving side of your having gone through and done this. But really quite just an enormous piece of work, and very happy that you did this. So let's... quite a few going here. Let's go down the list.
Andy Newton. So this is awesome. I think the working group should do something with it. I don't know, BCP, whatever, but this is exactly the type of thing the IETF should be doing. So I hope we continue down that road. I don't know why people aren't registering their extensions with IANA. I think maybe the designated experts are jerks. I don't know.
Maybe one of us.
Let me offer something about this specific point. Maybe, well, for the extensions, I think you could guess who is the guy. But maybe the next time I will put, a list of guilty people.
Yeah. No. I don't know why people aren't doing it. I know Scott and I are the DEs, and we get back really fast. So I don't know what's going on there. I'd be interested to know if there was some sort of other hang up in the IANA registration process. That would be interesting to know. As far as the 5840 links registry or whatever, that's a very good. I think you were pointing that out. That's kind of there's a lot of confusion around that. And I personally have never registered anything in there. And I don't know I'm not sure what the process is. So maybe we need to look at that. And we wanted to use things that the IETF had already standardized. That's why we're doing JCAR. And so we went with the 5840 links registry as well. And you look through what's already registered, and there's a ton of stuff in there.
Yeah.
And some of it's kind of, you're like, oh, I get what that's about. And some of you're like, I have no idea what this is for. I'll just use it anyway. So maybe, I don't know if it's appropriate for us to have our own little side document about what's more appropriate.
That's exactly the point, that maybe it's not a real, RFC's protocol standard, but the BCP would fit well, within AirDAP, here's the, values and the semantic we understand, and you should do those kinds of things instead of using, weird link values, for example.
Yeah. So 2 more points. I know you're not trying to shame people, but as a server operator, I would like to know if I violate any of these things. So you're more than welcome to send me all sorts of emails saying. Otherwise I can't fix it. I don't know if it's broken. I can't fix it. The other thing is that
I've done some, not exhaustive, because I became. That's way too much, but I did some.
You want to become the internet police, or you don't want to become that guy who's always annoying people. Anyway,
and there's some issues that I found that I didn't put in the draft because I contacted the guy saying, this is like awful, please fix it. And then it never showed up in the draft.
I know.
G-cards example.
I'm sure you ran into plenty of those. But anyway, as a server operator, I would appreciate it.
Sure.
So the other thing is that, and I'm sure this is in the document, there are several people who've created tools. Aaron has tools, APNIC has tools, you have tools, and I don't know why people aren't using them to validate their servers. So maybe if we should maybe put that in a section in the document saying, by the way, here's all these tools that can help you figure this stuff out, or at least they can point out that you have problems. Okay? Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Scott Hollenbeck, yeah, +1 to everything Andy said, but a couple of additional points. With respect to the extension stuff, I have to admit, even though I'm one of the guilty parties who was responsible for writing that document, when I wrote the object tag draft, which had a requirement, to add a new RDAP conformance value, I was looking at 7483, and I have to admit, I was confused because there are places where it uses examples of a string like lunarnic, and other places it uses lunarnic level 0.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there going, okay, so what should I do with this object tag thing? And frankly, I think I got it wrong.
And you are one of the author of
Yes. Yes. So all of that, Mark, I think you're making a very strong point of a need for us to respin 7482 and 7483 at a minimum. Right?
Yep.
Yeah, there's enough here that we are learning as a result of implementing these protocols.
And which is just great.
Exactly.
Right?
They're proposed standards, right? That doesn't mean we got it right. We're in the right direction, but there's things we need to fix. And I am certainly willing to put some energy into starting that process. 7484, I'm less convinced of, but hey, let's talk about it, right?
Yep.
Thank you. Rick?
Great, thanks. Rick Wilhelm, Verisign. Tactical thing. You mentioned in here the cores, requiring the cores, changing it to a must. In the RDAP profile that's used in the GTLD space, that there is a item in there that requires it to be a must. It's general agreement. Because we found it to be useful to tighten that up. The group of registration.
I'm in the IETF now, so I'm kind of a more generic.
So just supporting that. In general, just for people that don't know, Mark's IETF Regext document has been getting a lot of airtime and attention in an RDAP group that meets basically weekly of ICANN accredited registrars and registries that are doing RDAP implementations. And so while it's getting some attention here, it's getting a lot of attention over in that community. And that community is certainly thankful and appreciative to all the work that Mark has done in regards to documenting these.
Just to respond to that, I think there's like fix your bugs kind of issues, and also in the same document, which is okay, I think, for now, but at the end we'll have to, clean it up, is, recommendations for, new versions of specs, or maybe BCP deployment. There's a mix of different things, but I hope that the, ICANN community will actually fix the bugs at least, so those will disappear.
And then lastly, as far as the notion of flipping this, morphing this, evolving it to a BCP, I think that's a great idea. I would offer that right now it's probably more of a collection of anti-patterns. And so I think that the best current practices part is probably going to evolve over the next several months. But in general, that seems like a good idea. Thank you.
Cool.
It's Jim Gould from VeriSign. Rick just stole my thunder. I was going to call him anti-BCP. I don't know. But anyways, I really support the work. I'm sure the registrars would have really appreciated this for EPP. The way that I process this particular document is I looked at things that were what I consider implementation issues or specific implementation issues, broader issues, as well as like RFC feedback. So if I'm not sure how you would be able to categorize those things. That's how I was doing to try to identify who would be able to address these.
I agree. Right now, it's not fully, it's more like a logbook of, kind of an abstract logbook of what I found. And, obviously we'll tighten up as we go. Yeah, agree.
Hi, this is Murray. I wanted to agree with something Scott said, which is, oh my goodness, the process is working. We have required experience. Let's go update the standards track document. So terrific. If I can help with that in any way as a sort of sometime participant in the former Terra Weirds, please let me know. One thing though, as I skim the charter doesn't talk about modifying those, so you might have to tweak it. If you need help writing new charter text, I'm helping with that. I just want to assist moving this along as much as I can. That's not what I said.
No, he wants to be the next AD.
Oh, that's NumCom time.
Your rechartering is approved.
Stefan Bortsmeyer, AFNIC. When you were talking about the problem of link relation types that were not clear and used in inconsistent way, you were thinking of fixing the registry of link relation types or fixing LDAP documents?
Good question.
Well, because if I may, in theory, the registry of link relation types should be correct and complete. You just have to read the registry, see the...
I'm not sure at the moment. I was more kind of raising the issue. Either way, I don't know. Obviously, if it's the link relation type registry to fix, then that discussion should probably be somewhere in art, area somewhere, but or HTTP. I don't know, but I don't have a good suggestion at the moment. I was more raising the issue and see, where's the right place to do. In some ways, this, the registry itself is full of stuff. If we're going back to the well, okay, but there's so many to pick, right? And in some ways, a lot of them are essentially irrelevant to RDAP. And asking the community to go back and then put semantics on all those may be something that will never happen, even if we ask. So I was maybe a bit towards let's do a BCP or something and define the key values that are useful in the RDAP context and have the clear semantics for RDAP maybe that doesn't fly. I don't know. But I'm almost neutral in this. I'm just raising the issue first. So.
A similar question is for the URL percent encoding, because I was under the impression that the client was right in using a percent encoding. One of the points of LDAP is that we rely on HTTP, so we reuse everything. We don't have to define everything by ourselves. We just say, okay, look at the URI spec or the HTTP spec. So is it really so ambiguous in the URI spec? My guess was
I found I lost hope in going to all this, because it's actually depend on the scheme, right? So it's I've been the co-chair of an unsuccessful working group called IRI, and that was no fun. So anyway, I'm just saying. Both kind of queries should be supported by all servers, because client libs often do kind of to escape of, if this is the scheme number 1, then I should percent encode only these characters, and if it's scheme number 2, percent encode the other characters. The libs are just lazy. Whenever there's almost non-ASCII things, percent encoded all the time. So that's the behavior of the standard libs, at least the libs I've seen. So I was sending percent encoded by my client, and then it was rejected. It was like, what? So I think the server should be liberal in accepting both. So.
And as far as the link relationships thing go, I think we should probably consult Mark Nottingham on that.
Sure.
I've read the RFC, and I've looked at the IN registry, and I get confused by it. So I don't want to step on it or anything like that. So he's a pretty easygoing guy. So we should probably just ask him what he thinks the right thing to do is.
I completely agree.
Yeah. But it's a confusing. I admit it's a confusing topic. Maybe we should also consider what clients should do in the BCP. I don't know if that's necessary or not, but
yeah. I think both sides could be some recommendations on behaviors for the BCP.
Okay, thanks very much. Next up for potential work is Jim Gould with secure authorization transfer.
Thank you. This draft was recently published, and its primary purpose is to address the increased dependency on the authorization info value. In essence, the goal here is to provide a more secure way of managing the authorization info while using the existing features within the EPPRCs. But what's out of scope in this is the transfer process policy, things like the form of authorization or the implementation of an immediate transfer, or even defining the concrete time to live for an authorization info. So the elements of this draft include 3 different things. The first thing is the use of a strong random authorization info value. The reality here is that this is a generated value, and to increase the security is to ensure that we have the appropriate level of randomness. Specifically, the recommendation is 128 bits of entropy for the value. The good news is the fact that the EPPRC doesn't have any length restrictions for the auth info, so that's good. The second element is to make the auth infos short-lived. To be able to do that, the server needs to be able to allow for them to be unset. Many servers today don't do that, but the RFC does in fact support the unsetting of the authorization info. The other thing is that the authorization info would only be set during the transfer process. So therefore, there's no need for an authorization info unless there's actually a transfer that is occurring. The other item is to be able to support a TTL that is client managed. In essence, the registrars would have the capability to be able to define what that time to live is and use the features of the server to be able to unset it when that TTL expires. So the more the critical the domain name, the lower the TTL would be. And then the last item is around storage, specifically whether or not the auth info should be stored in the registrar, if it's stored in the registry, how it should be stored. The recommendation out of this draft is that the registrar does not store the value at all. It generates it, it provides it to the registrant, and there's no need to store it. So there's no risk of somebody within the registrar having access to that value. Additionally, in the registry, it's to store it using a one-way hash. So similarly, there's less risk of somebody being able to have access to that authorization info value. So if you go by this operational practice, these are the steps for a transfer. It first starts out with a create. So the domain has to be created. During the create, the authorization info would be passed as an empty value. There's no need for the authorization info at the time of create because there's no transfer. When the registrant wants to transfer, what they'll do is they'll go to the losing registrar, which will then generate a strong random value. The registrar will provide it to the registrant and also pass it to the registry, which will store it as a one-way hash. And then what will happen is that the registrant will go to the gaining registrar, provide the authorization info, which will then can be pre-checked using the info command, which accepts the authorization info. And then they can go ahead and submit it with a transfer request, which the registry will hash it, compare the hashes. If they're matched, then it's all good. The last thing is when the transfer successfully goes through, the registry will auto unset it. So in essence, it's like a create. So a transfer process is complete and the registry can go ahead and auto clear it. So in looking at the EPP RFCs, I wanted to see whether or not the RFC supported what was defined within this practice. The first thing is to be able to create with the empty auth info. It can. So the fact of the matter is that there's no length restrictions on the auth info. There's an ability to be able to pass an empty value, which allows us to be able to support this. The next is the ability to be able to unset the auth info. It just happens that there's two different ways to do this. In the domain RFC, it actually has an explicit element to be able to unset the auth info. It's called domain null. I'm not sure if you know about that element. I found that out. And then there's the other way where you can just pass the empty domain PW element. The contact RFC, which also has authorization info values, does not support the corresponding contact element. And then the next is to be able to update and use a strong auth info value. Again, there's no restrictions on length. There is an issue related to inclusion of a space in the random value. It just happens that white space is replaced in the XML parser, so it might be a good idea not to include the space. The last thing is that if the registry is storing it as a one-way hash, they cannot return the value in the info response. That is an optional value in the EPP RFC, so it can be supported. So in conclusion, this BCP is meant to enhance the security of the authorization info without the need for any new EPP extension, just utilizing the features that already exist in the EPP RFCs. And the idea here is the fact that the authorization info is only set during the transfer process. The client, in this case the registrar, can go ahead and manage a TTL since the server can support an unsetting of the authorization info. And then the storage is secured by not storing it in the registrar and only storing it as a one-way hash in the registry. And so I encourage you to review and provide feedback for this draft.
Hi, this is Barry. What is the intended status of this draft right now?
It would be a BCP.
So let me put a bug in your ear to look up what a applicability statement is. Look in RFC 2026. This seems to me to be more of a standards track thing. of this is how you do this, not a best practices. And an applicability statement is exactly that. It's a standards track specification that says how to use existing standards to accomplish something. So consider that.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, this is Ulrich from the Swedish Internet Registry. Yeah, that's exactly what we do.
You do this. Oh, good.
Yes.
That's good. That's good. So, I'm sorry. Do you support unsetting?
Yes, support
Okay.
unsetting, and pretty sure about that. And we store it in a salted hash,
Good.
and we never return it in an info request.
Oh, good. Well, maybe you can provide your implementation status information. I can add it to it.
Okay, go ahead.
The last, does your implementation allow the registrant to saying that during the create, can you give me the auth info? Because having that, I think that the registrant have a disadvantage, because when the time that you want to transfer, he had to contact the losing registrar. At that time, I don't know that, because I want to transfer without the losing registrar. So I know it's an implementation, people have to do it, can do it not, but I'm just thinking that from a registrant point of view, that would be losing my disadvantage.
Yeah, I didn't understand. You said there's a disadvantage to.
Disadvantage because as a registrant, when I created my name, I would like to get my auth info. So at any time I want to transfer, I can do it without having the losing registrar.
Well, I guess the question is that how many registrars out there actually allow for the registrant to set or have access to their authorization info at the time of create, I guess.
Jody Calker, GoDaddy. We don't allow the registrant to set up an auth code at all. And we generally don't like to give them the auth code on registration, because the domain can't be transferred for 60 days. This is what GTO is. Anyway, and we don't, it's a risk to have that auth code out there and have the customer forget that they actually have it, and it's in an email somewhere, their email gets hacked and the domain is gone because they had that auth code in there. So it's something that we'd like to see the auth code. Don't ask for it until you're ready to transfer, so that it's out there for just a limited amount of time. That's my concern anyway, of giving the auth code to a customer.
Okay, thank you. Tom Harrison? There he is. This is going to be a 5-minute discussion, right?
Thanks. Okay, so this is about a profile for JCard. There's been a fair amount of criticism of JCard from implementers on both the server side and the client side. Some of that is about the structure of JCard, particularly its use of arrays for things like attributes and also for delivery addresses, the structured part. Some of it is about vCard, which underlies JCard and is really a comprehensive contact information specification that includes a bunch of stuff that, at least on its face, isn't really relevant in the RDAP context. A profile obviously can't do anything about the structural issues, but it can at least limit the surface area of vCard that implementers need to worry about in the RDAP context. We have an RDAP server, we have some investment in JCard. We're interested to avoid having to switch formats if we can, so we thought we'd put this up and see if it will be enough to address people's concerns about JCard's use in this context. The document itself is really straightforward. We took the servers that are in the IANA Bootstrap file, got a few objects from each of them, and effectively did the union of what those servers used from JCard and documented it. A couple of extra things on top of that are the language and alt ID tags, because we're intending to do multilingual stuff fairly soon. And also the extensions defined in RFC 8605, because they're specific for RDAP. So we're interested, for those who have raised issues with JCard, if this is enough to head off switching formats. though the list traffic to date indicates that it probably isn't. In the event that it is, does anything else need to be included? And then at a more general level, if people are concerned about vCard's complexity, but perhaps not interested in the profile approach, do we need to discuss getting more and or better J-card libraries for implementers? Thanks.
This is Barry. This is not binding on you in any way, but the ADs think that JS Contact is a better approach, or is likely to be a better approach anyway. It's still under development.
Sure.
Any other comments or questions?
This is Jim Gould from VeriSign. This may be obvious based on discussions on the mailing list, but is there consensus related to the replacing J-card? I know that we talked about redoing the RFC potentially, but is there consensus? And in essence, then once there's consensus that we need to replace it, then identify what to replace it with.
Andy Newton. I support actually trying to figure out how to do the best we can with J-card at the moment. We already have many people who have implemented J-card. I've done it 4 times already. So there's plenty of deployment of this. Yeah, J-card is screwy, but it's not that screwy. I've come across worse things in the IETF, much worse things. And to be honest, as far as the RDAP ecosystems go, I think the Bootstrap registries are far more structurally unsound than J-card is. So I favor just trying to go forward with J-card. The only, and I'll note that having been on both sides of the communications, both as a server and a client, for servers, it's not that, it's hard to interpret the RFCs sometimes, but once you get it, you got it. It's the clients where it really is problematic, and that's where profile will help. If we switch to something else, then we start talking about flag days or something. I really don't know how that transition is going to work, and so there are a whole lot of questions about switching to it. So I prefer us to at least try to do the best we can with J-card for the time being.
Hi, this is Neil Jenkins. I can't comment on whether it's suitable or not for RDAP, but I've been involved with the JS Contact development, so I just wanted to have a few quick comments on that. 2 things. Firstly, one of the explicit goals is that while being fully featured, it scales for simple use cases to be really simple. It should appear simple if you're only using a few bits of it. JS Calendar, which is the kind of iCalendar equivalent of this, is in last call norm is published. That perhaps gives you a better idea of how that works. If you're creating a very simple event, it looks super simple. It's really easy to use. One of the problems with things like JCal and JCard is even the simple stuff is horrendous to work with and not the way anyone uses JSON outside of those systems. So in that respect, it probably would be good. Having said that, the JS Contact bit is not as developed. That's still going to take some months at least to finish. I don't know what the deadline is for this, so whether that's an issue or not. But if you did want to use it, we'd love more people to get on board with helping develop and finish it. It's certainly something that is going to be happening regardless of its adopted, whether it's adopted here, I think.
I'm going to need to cut the queue at George.
Barry, not speaking as an AD. So in response to Jim and Andy, I suggest that rather than saying, first we should figure out whether to replace J-card and then look at alternatives, I suggest that considering JS Contact as an alternative while you're making the decision is a better approach. Because as Andy said, yes, other things suck worse, but that's not a good reason to stick with things. On the other hand, existing deployments are, so it's all part of the decision.
Hi, George here. I think I might have a question, an implicit question to the implementer. So I've got kind of 2 or 3 points to try and make here. I want to echo what Thomas said. that this is quite important for us in terms of our sunk cost of investment. And I know that is not a very compelling argument in a community with many, many actors who have yet to make an investment. But nonetheless, there's a tussle going on here between people who have made an investment to a structural form and people who are considering an investment. And it's difficult. I acknowledge it's difficult. So the particular thing that I brought up at the ROW was that we have a compellingly strong desire for multilingual representation of high volumes of the contact information. We have a specific and meaningful use case that relates to the LEA and abuse contact function. And this is not, oh, the field should be UTF-8 so that it can be a name in Swedish with diacriticals. It is, we want there to be the version of the field in English and the version of the field in Croatian. And we want that because it empowers law enforcement behavior that's based on this thing called Mutual Law Assistance Program, MLAP, which is about not having the FBI try and black helicopter in country to deal with the criminal. It's about having the FBI pick up the phone and speak to a policeman in Mongolia saying, hi, there's bad actor, can you speak to them? And dual language representation empowers the two actors to talk sensibly about the data because it respects the hint in HTTP of browser preference for language. Clearly, we're not going to have that we do 69 languages per record, but you're going to have local language and English, the lingua franca. And it's going to, that is quite funny, isn't it? And it's going to empower a circumstance. So whilst I am here saying, please can we consider a profile, please can I ask you to consider investment in analysing, is a profile viable? And I understand I'm asking you to wear cost. And faced with the decision, do I just say JS contact and we're out of here, or do I invest in the assessment? I am asking you to wear a cost. I would like you to do that. My stop line in this is, can you confirm that you can support a dual language structure that is not the same as multilingual in a field? It's the representation of semantic field states, collections, addresses in more than one language.
Just very quickly, because I had cut off the queue and we running out of time.
So I'm happy to talk to anyone about this afterwards. This is Neil again. But very briefly, yes, if you look at JS calendar as this, as I said, a similar kind of spec, it has an approach where you can essentially you have a core language for the object, but you can also patch per language. So you can say each of these things now in this language, it's these. Sorry, it's a bit more complicated, so let's talk afterwards. I don't think it's time.
Okay, thanks. Let's move on to the last discussion that we have here. And Joseph, I see you out there. You want to jump into present mode here on the queue? There you go. You should be able to unmute yourself and talk, and I can do next slide for you when you're ready.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Next slide. This is the draft about the registration report definitions. The problem we try to address is actually we do between registries and registrars, we do not share a common format to inform what specific data a report should contain, and also compound on that we have multiple mechanisms of delivering a file, the report right now. Although we can actually using the same mechanisms to the delivery, not only the reports, but the report's definition file as well. So next slide. So the proposal is using JSON format, and the reasons behind proposing JSON is because JSON format is simple, it's flexible, it's extendable, and the current mechanisms for report delivery is REST, HTTP, and SFTP, and JSON works well for both. And if in future there's a desire for EPP, JSON can converge to XML very straightforward. But conversion to XML is not in scope for this draft. Next slide. So this is just one of the one of the bare minimum examples of what the JSON file contains. It contains the fields names the report contains, and what the character is used as the tokenizers for separating the file, the value. Next. So this one may be hard to repeat. This one is also included in the draft. This is just the expanded examples with what could be contained in the report's definitions. This example here contains more about the report naming format and about the report definition file itself, like versions and the last time this definition files get updated. Next slide. And this is the snippet of examples about the field definitions. This example here talks about the name of the field, what type of data there will be, and examples like can the field allow empty values. This example is also included in the draft. Next slide. So right now the draft have nothing need for IANA considerations, but I'm trying to propose and would love to get more feedback of whether we would love to have a IANA registry that people, particularly registries, can submit their report definitions repository that could benefit registrar and maybe more people in IETF and public. And next slide. And thank you. Would love to hear more people feedback about this draft.
Okay, thank you. One thing that is important to point out is we do already have in our backlog a document, a data set file format document. So this is an alternate along with that. So at some point when we come to moving to this work item, if we decide we're going to do it, then obviously we would bring both of these documents up together so that we could go through them as a working group and see what we wanted to do. And but Jim, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just make one comment. Jim Gould from VeriSign. Yeah, actually, I just reviewed it. It looks very similar to the data set file format. So I think we're pretty much in line related to how you may be able to do it. In the case of the data set file format, it's an XML-based approach with XML schema. So I think there's overlap that we can work together on.
Excellent. Any other comments or questions? Okay, then thank you very much, everyone. We do have one last item on our agenda, which is any other business. But let me just call for that here. And otherwise, we are a couple of minutes over. So I would say the right thing to do here is probably just say that we are done. I don't see anyone jumping to the mic. No one's in the queue over here. Thank you, Joseph. And so we're adjourned, folks. Thank you very much. Look for the mailing list.
Thank you.